My name's John McVea. I teach entrepreneurship at the University of St Thomas. Some of my research is focused on ethically pioneering situations where entrepreneurs are trying to make decisions and they are doing that at the edge of human knowledge. So they might be biotechnologists working with vulnerable patients, or they might be engineering entrepreneurs developing a new product that develops a new capability for society. And so one of the interesting questions is the degree to which they have to make those decisions in advance of regulation, in advance of even public norms about what's right and what's not right. So that's what's particularly interesting to me, is that how they make those decisions without necessarily the moral guidance of an established legal system or social norms. What we find is when you look at managers who are experienced in making these sorts of decisions, they do a couple of distinctive things. First, they use a great deal more moral imagination than would be typical in business decision making. And there are a couple of elements to that. The first one is they have a much clearer idea of moral identity. They start with the person they are. So for instance, they would say things like, I want to consider this decision as a citizen of the world. Or I want to take consider this decision as a human being, from a human perspective. As opposed to some inexperienced decision makers, as a comparison group, who tend to adopt the role. I want to consider this decision in my role as a manager, in my role as an agent for shareholders. And those end up with fundamentally different perspectives on the decision. So the first question is this: having a clear understanding of your moral identity as a human being, not just as an agent for someone else. The second thing is in terms of moral inclusion. What we find is these decision makers take a much broader scope of consideration in the decision making. So they not only consider financial stakeholders, who are obviously clearly very important, but they also considered a great deal wider group of stakeholders, including customers, employees, patients, members of the local community. And so they take a much broader perspective and actually complicate the decision making process before they simplify it. So one of the learnings we have is really resisting this temptation to oversimplify complex ethical decisions, and to take the time to complexify to a degree the decision making, and to take time to reflect on that as part of your decision making process. I think what's distinctive at St Thomas are a couple of things. First is our commitment to a classic liberal education, on top of which we build our business skills. So our students come to this with the core education in the liberal arts. Secondly, that we weave our ethical questions into our business education. That in every class our students are asked to reflect on those, and that we have specific classes within St Thomas where our students struggle with these questions of ethics, career, personal values. And so I think that is distinctive. And it's increasingly rare in a business training where we focus on the technical skills almost to the exclusion of the broader liberal arts and ethical questions. Well, one of the interesting courses we have, I teach a course called Faith and Entrepreneurship, co-teach that with a theology professor. And in this course, we try to encourage our students to weave the questions of their own values and their own career into the question of what business they want to start. So for instance, we could do that by looking out in society and listing all the opportunities that are available to us as students, and then deciding which of those could we live with, depending on our own value set. And in this course, we try to take the other approach. We try to say, start with an introspective notion of what do you believe in? What values are important to you? What sort of an entrepreneur do you want to be? And then see, how do we structure a business opportunity around that? So to some degree, it's reversing the process with seeing entrepreneurship as beginning with an internal search rather than an external search. And that's one of the approaches that we take that's been very successful. The University of St Thomas, ahead of the curve.